What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another AI building block video. Today, I'm going to show you how to use large language models in Unity powered by AI features that are now available with Meta SDK's V83 and greater. If you watched my last video, we went through how to configure object detection for both on-device and also cloud inference, which is a pretty common feature used for context awareness use cases. This video instead is going to be focusing on the conversational side of AI using LLMs with prompts that include text, images, and also videos. All right, enough said, let's jump into my computer and start working on it. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're gonna be adding a LLM building block this time. And just so you know, I'm gonna be changing a little bit how these videos are recorded. I'm not going to be editing as much anymore, just so that I can bring you a lot more content. So just make sure that you let me know if you like this format. It's gonna be more fluent, I'm gonna make a lot of mistakes. And I think people like that because that is really normal of what happens with developers. So I'm just gonna make sure that I don't try to edit, or I don't edit as much anymore. So what I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna go ahead and go into scene here, and we're going to basically scenes, and we're gonna be creating a brand new scene. So go ahead and select new scene, and I'm gonna call it AI building blocks, and in this case, LLMs. So I'm gonna name it that because we're gonna be dealing with large language models in this case, which means that we're gonna be basically creating conversational type AI experiences for VR and then MR. So what I'll do is I'm going to basically use the pass-through camera access component that I showed you from the previous video. So go ahead and go here to building blocks, and I already am on AI capabilities. But if you land here, you just click on AI capabilities, and then just go ahead and add the pass-through camera access. So as soon as you do that, this is going to have a dependency on basically a camera rig, and this camera rig is going to be set up to basically work with the pass-through camera. And then camera access is gonna give you access to what you see through your cameras, and then we're gonna be able to capture a texture from that. I'm also gonna be using the target material. I'll show you how that works today so that we can put that texture into a material, and then we're gonna be using that texture in a different UI component. I think we're good to go here. So if you go under, actually, let's go back to building blocks, and I'm also going to be adding this large language model building block. This is going to be the one that we're going to be focusing on today. And just make sure that you select cloud, and then for the provider, we're going to be using Grok at some point, but for now, let's go ahead and select, we can just select the Hugging Face one, and then we can leave everything else as default. Let's go ahead and just hit confirm, and then now we should be good to go. So the first thing that you see on the right-hand side is that we have a LLM agent. We also have a LLM Agent Helper. This is gonna be the one basically that is a platform agnostic, or you can say LLM agnostic, which means that you can communicate with OpenAI, you can communicate with ChatGPT, to Hugging Face, Grok, and so on. And that's all going to be based on the provider asset. The provider is the one that it's going to know what type of credentials or what type of information it's going to need depending on the LLM that we're going to be using. So this is going to be a handy component that we'll use. And then there's also a couple of events that we can bind into. Also an LLM Agent Helper, which it has default prompts that we can also use if you wanted to describe the image. That, let's say that we're using an image from the camera, and that camera, the image, we need to get more descriptions about it, then you can also send that along. So what's important here though is if you were to select include image and you select camera, it's going to be using automatically, it's going to try to get that texture from the camera, which is pretty helpful. Let's say that you're looking at a tree and you wanted to know what type of tree that was, then you can select this and you can ask your question in here. And that means that when the LLM sends a request, it's going to include the image, and also it's going to include the text that you're sending along to the LLM. So just keep in mind that not all LLM providers are going to support images as well as text. So I'm going to show you how you can make sure that it supports both, or it supports one depending on your use case. So I'm gonna go ahead and uncheck this. We don't need to send the image, at least not for now. And then we also have the debug inspector, which is gonna be helpful if we wanted to do testing for this type of implementation without actually doing much coding. I'm gonna show you how that works as well. So let's go back in here, and before we keep going, if you wanted to basically include an image that was part of your project, you can also do that. You can see here, like if I click on this, it includes this image, which is useful if you wanted to test with the Immersive Debugger. So I'm gonna go back, and that's another option. And then also if you wanted to provide an image from a URL, that's also going to be an option. So let's go ahead and uncheck these for now. So now what I'm gonna do though is if we go up and then click on the provider asset, I think this name looks fine. I was gonna say, wait, we'll rename it, but it's actually, let's go ahead and rename it so that it's shorter. And we can just say LLMs Hugging Face Provider Profile. And then you're gonna see here that this already has some information for you. It has an endpoint, and it also has a model ID, and also whether you want to support vision or not. So in this case, the model that we're gonna be using doesn't support vision, so just leave that as unchecked. And then we also need a token. So I'm gonna show you. So if we go back into Hugging Face, and I'm actually gonna go back to the very beginning. Let's go ahead and copy this. And let's say that you land on Hugging Face, right? You're trying to decide, okay, what model do I use? Just go ahead and click on models here. And then you can also say, okay, I wanna just look at the Llama ones. And let's say that you only wanted to get text generation type LLMs. You can see that these ones are all text generation. I can also click in here, and this is gonna be basically everything in here is going to be conversational AI. And then if I wanted to, provide an image, then I can select this, and you can see that there's some Meta Llama models that we can also use. So I'm gonna keep it simple, and we can just do text generation. I think the one that I wanted to use was gonna be this one. So let's go ahead and select it. Another thing that I normally check is click on use this model, and you're gonna see that it has these inference providers. And this is cool because we can communicate with it via HTTP, like an API. So in this case, and I showed you this on the previous video, you can communicate with this by using Python, JavaScript, curl, and I'm sure there's many other options. But at the end of the day, what I need is going to be this part right here, which I think is already part of the provider that we're already having here. Well, this is pointing to Grok, so I don't want to use Grok just yet. So let's go ahead and replace that. And then the other thing that I want to replace though is going to be this model. Go ahead and paste that into here. And then you can also generate an API key if you wanted to by clicking in here and then going into access tokens. I already did that, so I'm not going to do that. And if you were using Grok, you can also do the same thing, go into API keys, and then you can generate your API key. So for now, I already have it in here, and just make sure that you keep this secure. You don't never want to share this information. I'm actually going to delete them after the fact, but this shows you kind of like the format of the API keys. So I'm going to go here and then go ahead and paste it. Go ahead and validate it just to make sure that it's correct. And then we can go ahead and click on check just to make sure that the model ID, the API key, and the endpoint are all correct. So I think we should be good to go. So now if I go back into my large language model, I'm going to just change this a little bit. It's going to be the default questions, right? So if I don't provide anything, it's going to say describe the image. We don't have an image, so it might get confused. Or it might tell you, well, you didn't provide an image. But in this case, this model doesn't support images, so we just want to ask a question. So I'm going to go ahead and, I'm not going to type, but I'm just going to go ahead and copy some text that I have in here. And what this is saying is going to say, okay, explain what is the difference between mixed reality and augmented reality. Also, some popular SDKs or tools available, encoded snippets for plane detection. So just basically a question that I am very familiar with, so I wanted to know what it's going to generate. And then the include image is set to false, so I think we should be good to go. And once you do this, all we need to do is we can run it here. I don't need to put my VR headset on because I'm gonna show you how this looks. I'm gonna make this maybe a little bit bigger so that we can see everything. And then I think we just go ahead and hit play. And the way that it's gonna work though, is gonna be able to send a prompt by running here in the Unity editor without having everything else already set up on my headset. So if you go in here, let's give it a minute here. I think it's trying to There we go. So it's gonna give you a lot of different errors, and I think this is fine because let's go ahead and uncheck this, because it's trying to run on the headset, right? Like there's components in here that are not going to work without it. And then I just wanna make sure that these MRUK share get latest image only supported on Android. Okay, I think it's fine. Let's go ahead and ignore it. It's gonna bug me, but that's fine. Meaning that I don't like seeing errors. Okay, so we have this questioning here. We have the default prompt, and then we have this button here that we can also select. And you can see that we're explaining what is the difference between MR and AR, also some popular SDKs or tools available. And then we got this response here. And I go ahead and scroll up. And for some reason, I don't see that result showing in here at all. And I wonder why that is, which is, I think it's fine, but let's find out. I did get some warnings. Also looks like the requested model does not exist, invalid error, model not found. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop this and check why this is throwing that error. I have my key and I have my llama. I thought this was oh, I see. I have a space in here, so just make sure that you don't put a space. Okay, so now we can go ahead and I think everything else should be fine. We're gonna get some errors like we did before, but hopefully we can get our answer. Let's go ahead and hit play, wait until this executes. And this is the beauty about not editing videos as much, is because if you encounter issues like the one that I just encountered, then you know exactly what to do, right? Versus everything being edited. Okay, so I think we're good. I'm gonna go ahead and hit send. We have our question. You can see the question in here, just like we did before. And then this is an API, and this API it's not very, very fast. So you can see that it took a little bit of time. It started at 3:05 with 51 seconds. So it took about 9 seconds to generate the response. And then the cool thing is you can see here that we have the entire JSON request that was sent out. And I'm gonna show you that. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy these. And then I have this really handy thing on VS Code that allows me to prettify the JSON. So if you are curious, you make sure that you install Pretty JSON and also Markdown Preview GitHub. I'll show you why that is. But let's go ahead and close that, and then I'm gonna go ahead and paste this. And then I'm gonna go ahead and, I'm in Windows, so I'm gonna do Control-Shift-P, and it's gonna bring in my command palette here. I believe if you wanted to pull that manually, you can just go View and then hit Command Palette. But I'm gonna go ahead and prettify the JSON. Just make sure that you have it selected. And now that I have it selected, you can see that this was the request that was sent out. You can see basically what the structure of the JSON is, what the model is, when it was created, actually the message that was sent, which is, the question that we ask. And then actually it's going to have the question and the answer, which you can see, yep, this is the answer that came back. And then if we go back down, actually the question is not here, it's not really needed. This is just the response. And then the other part that is really helpful though is if you look at this is gonna be all marked down. And it has the answer to one of the questions. One of the questions set to include code snippets. And looks like it did give me code snippets. I'm gonna go ahead and copy this whole thing, which is in Markdown. So I'm gonna go ahead and go into my MD file here, delete everything, and then paste it. And then I'm gonna do my command palette as well, and then go into, you can type in Markdown or just go ahead and open in Markdown. You can see that, okay, we asked about what was MR versus what was augmented reality. It gives us some information in here, what the differences between them. Also some popular SDKs, which is really cool. And also some different code snippets if we were to do plain detection. So in this case, this is doing OpenCV in C++, which is very interesting. And then also in C#. I don't think this is correct, to be honest, STD, but it's okay. I mean, it gives you an idea of how to achieve that. Know that some of the models are not up to date. I think this model was released on 2024, and then the data is up to, I think, at the end of 2023. So that's something to look into as well, where you're looking at these models. So if you go into Hugging Face and we scroll down, you're gonna see the knowledge of this model, the cutoff time was March 2023 through, and also December 2023. And you can see when it was actually released. So really good information to know before using a model, is just to do a little bit of research. But I think for simple things where you need additional context like this, I think this is great. What I'm gonna do is go ahead and click on large language models again and double click on the LLM agent. And what I'll do is if we go down to line 163, I just wanna show you what happens, right? When we're sending this information through the LLM to either ChatGPT, to OpenAI, to Llama. And what I'll do here is I'm gonna go ahead and put a breakpoint, maybe around there, and then I'll go ahead and put another breakpoint. This one is going to basically generate a chat request with the text and also the images. In this case, we don't have images, but it's still going to generate a request with just the text. And then at this point, we're gonna be basically getting the request text out and then storing that in this assistant. But I think the idea here is so that you can look at the workflow. If you wanted to call these manually yourself, which we're gonna be doing today, you get an idea of how it works. So what I'll do here is I'm gonna go ahead and attach to the Unity editor as well. So we can go ahead and click on the little bug icon here, and it's gonna go ahead and attach. You can see attached to Unity editor, just give it a minute. Now we have the debugger up and running, and then we also have a bunch of different information here, which is gonna be very useful. And then we can say enable debugging for this session. I think it's fine. Let's go ahead and change the user input. In this case, I'm gonna say something like, what is the latest C# version available today, and how are extensions handled? Can you provide, let's try to provide a code snippet. Okay, so I'm saying a code snippet so that we can get some code examples. And I think we don't need to do an image this time either, and I'm gonna go ahead and hit play. So the difference between now and before is that we're going to be debugging, right? I wanna show you how we're sending this information. So let's go ahead and hit play. We're gonna get an error again. I think just for now, just ignore it. When we go to the headset, it should not be an issue. Go into our console, and then it's gonna go ahead and clear this out. So if you notice though, we haven't sent it yet, so that's why we haven't basically breaking into the code. I'm gonna go ahead and break into it, and we should see now that it's breaking into it. We don't have any images. We do have the text, which is what is the latest C# version. And I want you to keep in mind that right now we're in January 25 of 2026, so the latest version of C#, I think it's not going to be what we're gonna get now because this is as of 2023. So that, I think that's gonna be a good exercise. And then I'm gonna go ahead and step over, so by hitting F10, and then at this point it's going to make the request to the API, so it's gonna go back into Unity because it's going to be running that as a task. And then when it finishes, we should get, there we go, breakpoint again. So now you can see that this is returning the chat response. We have the raw information, which is going to be the actual JSON data. And I'm using Writer, so Writer does an amazing job basically prettifying this. Or you can look at the raw data if you wanted to do that. And I also can look at the information that got back. And as you can see, C#11 is what's available because this data is pretty old. So now if you go down though, you can go ahead and I'm gonna do F10, 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 and then in here, everything should be now in a way that I can just go ahead and copy and paste it. So this is all marked down, right? So I could go back into my markdown file here, delete everything, and then we can just go ahead and open the preview, and you can see the latest C# version. In this case, it says that this is version C#11, which is not right. And then it also tells you what extensions are. You can do a method extension, and let's go back in here. You can also do a property extension. And if I look at this, it looks correct to me, that we're this, and then whatever you want to extend. And then, yep, so this one has a vowel, and then it's just a method to tell you exactly if we have a vowel or not in the string. And then also an example extension on, actually an example program on how to execute that extension. So this is pretty cool and pretty handy. And let's go ahead and go back in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and say, what is the latest C# version? And right now is C#. I used to know everything about C#, but I haven't been coding as much anymore. So that's what I wasn't really sure. But C# 14, it's the greatest and latest. So you can see that this returned C# 11 because this model is now basically live data. This is as of the end of 2023. But this is really helpful, right? So now that you have these, though, we don't need to, there's other basically callbacks that you can bind to on assistant reply, on response received. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F5 so that we can go back, and then it's going to finish that request. So what I'm going to show you, though, is we can actually execute some of these different prompts by using Immersive Debugger. So I'm going to show you how we can also set that up. Multiple ways that you can enable Immersive Debugger. You can go here and then click on this, which I think it's the easiest way. Or you can go into Build Profiles and then Player Settings, and then go into Immersive Debugger and then basically enable it in here. So I'm going to show you this way. So if you click in here, and then it's going to take you exactly to that location. And then another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to display it on startup. I think that's fine. And then we want to show inspector, the console, and then we can also show the error logs. So I think everything is going to show by default, but then you can toggle it on and off with the controller. Okay, so I think we should be good to go. Go into Build Profiles, and then I'm going to go ahead and connect my VR headset, and then we'll deploy it to the headset, and I'll show you the results. All right, you can see that now when the app gets deployed, it's going to ask us for access to the headset cameras. Go ahead and select Save My Preference, and then hit Allow. I'm going to do the same thing with spatial data, and then hit Allow. So as soon as you open it, you're going to see that Immersive Debugger has the windows open, just like we designated by going through the settings. I'm also going to select this icon here so that we can bring it closer, and then click on or select the recycle bin to clear everything. I'm going to go into my custom LLM Agent Inspector, and you're going to see that these are the pretty fine components that we have available. This is the image that is going to use for the debugging purposes. Also the send prompt button, and also if we wanted to use some of these pretty fine prompts. And then if we wanted to include the image, yes or no. In this case, we don't, right? We just want to select send prompt. And then as soon as I do that, you're gonna see what is the latest C# version available. This is a question that we ask through the Unity Inspector component. And you can see now that we have the results. And if we look at it, we can see the latest version of C# available today is C# 11. Just keep in mind that this model was trained as of the end of 2023, so that's why it is C# 11 and no C# 14. But you can see that all the data is showing correctly. We have the code snippets, which is exactly what we saw through that Unity editors. So I'll just go ahead and click pass-through here. And I thought this was gonna happen automatically when you add the pass-through camera access, but unfortunately, this is basically has a dependency to the camera rig, which I would think it should be the pass-through camera instead, but for some reason, it was set up that way. So because of that, we're gonna go ahead and add the pass-through component. Just click on the plus symbol, and now we should have an experience that has pass-through capabilities. So what I'm gonna do though, is I'm gonna go into Build Profiles. Also make sure there's no anything that we need to enable here on the project setup tool. Looks like that is good to go. And then also, I didn't tell you this before, but just make sure you're building the AI Building Blocks LLMs scene, which is a new one that we're working on. So once you're good to go, just go ahead and hit build and deploy. Just go ahead and hit save. All right, so it looks like we have pass-through functionality working just fine. So let's go ahead and bring in the Immersive Debugger windows. It's gonna be the custom inspector, and then let's also do the console. We're gonna do the same thing and empty all the different logs, go into LLM agent, and in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and do send prompt. And there's really no changes in here. There's gonna be exactly what we ran before. I just wanted to show you that we could also pass through, which we're gonna need for the following demos where we're going to be getting information from the real camera and then getting additional details from what we're seeing through the MetaQuest device. So we use Hugging Face quite a bit here, and what I'm gonna do next is we're gonna be using Grok. So let's go ahead and head over to console.grok.com. And the reason why I'm doing this is because we're going to be getting additional context from images before we use text. So now I'm going to show you what we need to do for images. So if you look at this console, I set up basically a free account, so you can do that as well, just for development purposes. And then if you go under API keys, you're going to see here that you can create an API key. I already created one, so I already have that information. But if you haven't, just go ahead and create one and just give it a name. And just make sure that you keep that secure. So that's all you need to do there. And then if you go back to the console, you're going to see that we have multiple models in here. There's models for reasoning. There's also for text-to-speech. And Grok is extremely fast. And I think that's one of the advantages of using Grok over other different providers. And you're going to see that when I make a call to the API, you're going to get a response right away. And I don't know if that's because of development purposes or the type of API key. I think it's just Grok, the hardware itself, is specifically for AI. And they are, I was reading that they are actually really fast when it comes to processing the, any requests that you do for LLMs or machine learning. So what I'm gonna do though is, let's go ahead and I'm gonna select Llama for Scout, and this is gonna be the one that we're gonna be using. I also have a few images, and you're more than welcome to use any type of images. So the ones that I have in here are gonna be an arcade, a car, and a bike, and so on. So I'm gonna start with the arcade, the JPEG here, and you can just drag it and drop it into here. And let me go ahead and do that again. Just make sure that you drag it and drop it into the right area. And then once you do that, it basically is going to attach the image. And this is the playground, so just make sure that you go to that. So we can say something like describe. I can say describe image. Describe this image, and when were these game titles released. So let's go ahead and take a look at that image before we send it out, so that I can basically show you what we are going to be expecting. And if you notice, this image is not very high res, and I did it on purpose because I wanted to make sure that the payload from Unity was going to be light. But you can see we have a Spider-Man machine, and then you can also see some of the different, basically, levels on some of these ones. Also here, I think this one is either X-Men or Street Fighter. I don't know, to be honest, but there's different games, right, on this arcade. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and close that. And then let's see how this is going to do. You can also see on the right-hand side that you can select whether this is gonna be doing Python, JavaScript, curl. And this is really good information for you if you want to implement it or integrate it into a specific coding language. So what I'll do here is I'll just go ahead and send these out. I think enter didn't work, so just go ahead and do and send. And you can see that right away it just came back, and it took 356 milliseconds, which is really crazy. It tells you here how many tokens we use, the outputs in seconds, input seconds, and then it gives you all the different statistics. So it tells you here the image, it's basically depicts a row of arcade games with several classic arcade machines. You can see that this is a Spider-Man, the first one, and it was released in March 1991. So if I go back into curl, I'm gonna be able to get that. And then, so you can see that it says api.grok.com. So we're not going directly to Hugging Face. We're basically gonna be calling this API, and then go back in here, and it's gonna be the endpoint. And then I already have a key, and I'm gonna go into credentials, and this is gonna be basically my Grok key. So let me just make sure that I copy it correctly, and then paste it. Make sure you don't have any spaces like I did before. Validate, and then let's see if this works, and then check. And I think they should be okay. I don't know why it give us yellow. Token appears invalid for the Hugging Face provider, but still might be a valid inference provider. Okay, so it said it's okay, because Grok could be a little bit different format, so it just doesn't really know if this is gonna be Hugging Face, which is no, it's Grok, but it should work. Okay, so I think we should be okay, and we have supervision, which is something that I want to do this time. I want to send an image and also get information about that image. So what I'm going to do though is we need to replace this provider, and I'm going to say this is going to be Grok. And then instead of saying what is the latest C# version available, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And we can just leave it like that and then include image. I'm going to go ahead and include the image. The image that we're going to be including, it's actually going to be the image from in this case, we're going to be doing inspector texture. Because I was thinking, okay, am I going to be using the headset to capture the image? But we're not just yet. We will in just a minute. But what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to go into resources here. And I'm going to create a new folder. Let's go ahead and call it images. And then what I can do, though, is let's go ahead and go into this directory. And I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this. And you're going to see that we have our image, right, for the restaurant. I think everything else in here should be fine. We don't need to make any big changes. So in the size of this one, it's going to be 0.6 megabytes. I think that's fine. Go ahead and save the scene. Go back to the large language model. And then I'm going to say it's going to be an inspector texture. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and replace that with this. We got the new version here already set up. Let's go ahead and do the same thing we did before. I'm going to go into my LLM agent. And you can see the image that we just added and the one that we evaluated by using Grok. So by default, it's going to basically have the prompt that we specify. We didn't have one, so I'm just going to use one of the built-in ones. So in this case, yes, I do want to describe the image. I also want to make sure that the image is included in the actual prompt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit send. And you can see the response came right away. So here is our question, what do you see on this image? And it has also the stack trace. Now, if you want to know the details of that, you can see the image depicts a corner of a building with a tan stone exterior and so on. So basically what we had before. You can see here that some of the information from the menu, the overall atmosphere of the image suggests a casual, rustic establishment. But you can see that it all works successfully. I'm going to go ahead and make a call one more time so you can see how fast it is. It just comes in right away. And those are requests. That wasn't cache. That was actually a request that was made to the API. So what about if I were to do something different, right? Like if we want to do, maybe we'll just change this to be and ask the question of what's the capital of Switzerland. So we can select that. And I'm going to go ahead and uncheck this so that it doesn't include the image in the API request. And then I'll go ahead and say send prompt. And you can see that the capital of Switzerland is Bern. Go into Package Manager. So we can say Package Manager here. And then if you haven't installed Interaction SDK before, you might need to go to the Unity Asset Store and then basically add it there. And then you can check it out under My Assets in the Package Manager. But I already have it, so I just gotta do Interaction SDK. And then it should list the latest version in here. I'm gonna go ahead and install that. So it looks like that is installed, and this one also got installed automatically, so we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and look at what changes this is going to ask us for, basically to apply. It says hand tracking support, it's set to controllers only. Let's go ahead and enable hands. That's pretty much what that's saying. So it looks like this is already good to go. So what I'm gonna do though is, now that we have that component, if you go into the pass-through camera access, there's one thing that I want to do before we get into the UI piece, is I want to populate a target material. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and add a new folder here. And then this one, we can just call it materials. I'm also going to delete this recovery. Unity crashed, so I had to basically save my changes to that directory, which we don't need anymore. And then for the material though, we're gonna be creating a new material. We can just go ahead and just call it pass-through material. And make sure that you type that correctly and no follow my mistakes. And then the component here, the actual shader that we're going to be using is going to be the only, and then we can say texture, and should be this one right here. And then it's just going to be basically a white texture because nothing has been assigned to it. But that's going to be basically the placeholder where the actual texture from the camera is going to be written to. So now that we have that, if we go into the pass-through camera access, this is going to allow you to, this component behind the scenes is going to write to that material. That way we always have the material of whatever we're seeing through the camera available, and then we can take a screenshot, not a screenshot, but a capture of that through code. And I'm going to show you how that works. So now that we have that, let me show you where we can pull the UI from. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse this so you guys can see everything. And then if we go under the Meta XR Interaction SDK, and then going to actually the Essentials, which is going to be this one. And then if you go to Runtime, you're going to see somewhere in here that we have, I think it's under Objects, if I remember correctly. Let's see, so we have it under, Runtime, Sample, Objects, and Environment. So it's going to be under Samples, and then let me just make sure that I go back in here. Runtime, and then you're going to go into Samples, and then you're going to go into Objects, and then Environment. And the one that I'm going to use is going to be this one under Tooltip. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and drag it and drop it here. I'm going to show you how it looks. And it's going to require that we bring in TextMesh Pro. So let's go ahead and import TMP Essentials. So that way the actual text is going to render correctly. And we can also make this maybe a little bit smaller so we can see the text that we have in here. But the way that it's going to work, though, is I want this area here to be the actual raw image once we capture a frame from the pass-through camera access component. And if we're capturing, basically, if we already capture it, it's going to have the frame. But if we're about to capture, it's going to show kind of like a video of what I'm seeing through the camera. So what I'll do, though, is I want to show you a couple of things in here that this includes. And this is cool because if you wanted to have buttons, and there's multiple buttons that this has available, primary, secondary, and also if you just want to add one button instead of having the two, you can do that, which is what I ended up doing. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and I'm going to show you one that I already modified. This video is not really about UI, so I don't really want to bore you with that. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and drag and drop this component. So once you drag it and drop it, it's going to be basically showing as a prefab, which it is. And then I'm also going to be dragging and dropping this keyboard component. So you guys can go ahead and open it and look at it. But basically what it is going to be using this interface, which is the touch screen keyboard. And that's going to allow you to open the system keyboard. So for now, we can just go ahead and minimize this. I'm going to drag it and drop it here under my scripts. And then the next thing that we need to do is you need to enable the system keyboard for your project. And that's something that you can do by just enabling a setting. So I'm going to go into my camera rig here. And then if you go down here, you're going to see require system keyboard. So it's going to go ahead and enable that. And now we can use the system keyboard in our application. So now we have that. If we go under the prefabs, I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this component, which is my version. And you can see that this looks similar to what we had before, except that I made a couple of changes. And those changes are going to be, looks like we have one change here to made. All building blocks dependencies must be present in the scene. Go ahead and hit fix. And then, okay, looked like there were a couple of things that was requiring. Displaying UI without using, I'm not going to enable that because I had issues before, so I'm going to go ahead and ignore it. And then we can also ignore that. And I think we should be good in here with our UI. Yep. Looks like it's good to go. Okay, so let me just show you some of the different components. We also need to add another one that is called basically the pointable canvas module. So, but for now, let me just show you here what this has. So if you look at the image container, it's going to have basically a raw image. Let me go ahead and minimize this and bring it down. It's going to have a raw image, and this is going to be the live feed of what I'm seeing through the pass-through cameras. And then the capture image is going to be basically what it says. Once I press this button here, it's going to put that image as a raw image, and it's going to hide this live image. And then the other things that are pretty, good to know, it's going to be the LLM input field, which is going to be what we're going to be sending to the LLM. I'm also going to be using the system keyboard, so this is where this is going to be taking, it's going to be using that feature. And then this scroll view took me some time to make work. So basically it's going to allow you can scroll down or scroll up or use array interactor, because this has poke interactions and also array interactors. And also hand tracking works with these, and then controllers. So, and you can see here that those components were added correctly. So the next thing that I'll do though is if we go, let's go ahead and create a new empty game object. I'm gonna call this one the pointable canvas module. And then I can just set it to be, I don't like it when it has numbers on the different transform values. And then this one is gonna need an event system. And I think everything in the event system, it's fine. It's gonna ask you to add a default input module. I'm going to add one actually that this is gonna require, which is gonna be the pointable canvas module, which is gonna be this one right here. And we can just uncheck the exclusive mode. And that's how the examples had it. So I'm basically following the same structure. So now this is gonna allow you to basically capture the input and forward it correctly to the appropriate UI events. Okay, so now what we need to do though is we're gonna have to create a component that is going to get all this information. It's gonna communicate with the LLM. It's going to know when to pull this text when you're done interacting with the keyboard. And then it's gonna send the information to the LLM, like I mentioned. So to do that, I'm gonna go under scripts, and then we're gonna create a new model behavior script. This one I ended up calling image analysis controller. So you can call it anything you like. Image analysis controller. These kind of make sense to me. And then what I'll do though is I want to make sure that I start adding folders for all of these different components. So let's just wait here until the compilation finishes. And there we go, object detection. I'm actually going to be moving these two right here, which had to do with object detection, into that folder. And then we'll have everything to do with image analysis in the root of the scripts. So what we'll do next though is let's go ahead and go into basically my pass-through camera access. And then I'm gonna collapse this actually so that we have more space there. And then you can just go ahead and drag it and drop it in here. And double click it to open it. We can minimize some of these items. Just to give you an overview, this is how you would access the LLM agent. So if you wanted to interact with an LLM, I recommend looking at the LLM agent component. This gives you basically all the functionality that you'll need to communicate with all the different type of LLMs. So you can see some of that code in here and some of the methods such as send prompt async that takes in text, basically the prompt, in a single image. You can also basically implement one that passes the pass-through image automatically if you call this one. So I think everything else looks good in here. So just spend more time in there if you wanted to understand how that works. So let's go back into my image controller. Same thing here, pass-through camera access. That's a component that you can also use to get basically the camera texture. And then some of the UI bindings that we're going to need here, the live image, capture image. So these are going to be some of the different components that I show you on the dialog that we brought in. And then also the information that we're capturing, right? We need to know, okay, what is the text information that we got back from the actual, I think this is going to be for the prompt. And then this is going to be for the LLM response. We're also going to need a render texture because we are getting that from the target material. But we also need to write one temporarily in here so that we can get it out and set it to the capture image component that is also going to show you the capture. And then also we need a capture frame. This bool is so to determine if we're capturing or not capturing. So this happens as soon as you hit the capture button. That's going to change the state. And we'll do a couple of changes here on the UI when that happens. So if we set these to be capturing in progress, meaning that we capture the image, what's going to happen is this is going to be false. So we're not going to be displaying the live image. It's not going to show a live feed of the camera. But it's going to show you the capture image, right? Because that is the capture at that point. I'm also going to be changing the text. So as soon as we take a capture, we're going to change that to be clear capture. Otherwise, it's going to be capture. I'm also going to be, depending on the state of this, I'm going to be showing or not showing the scroll view. It makes sense to show the scroll view as soon as this information, the LLM response is available. So you could improve this a little bit more if you wanted to make sure that you have information back, but I'm just using the state of this variable to determine when to display that. And then just a couple of different checks in here just to make sure that we don't cause our own problems, and then make sure that we get the text from the different components on the UI. We are going to start with no capturing by default. I'm also going to be creating a render texture. It's going to be 1024 by 1024. Also make sure that you have the pass-through, the actual target material written to the texture written to the target material. That way we can basically write it to that render texture. And then you can see here that the live image texture is going to be set to the render texture. And this is going to be basically updated on the update method. So I'll show you that in a minute. Also, this is going to happen whenever we hit the capture button. We're going to be changing the state. We're going to be capturing a frame. And then this is going to be very important because when we get the information back from the LLM, we're basically going to populate our UI, right? We got the response back. It's going to populate the text value, and then I'm also going to log it just in case. This is going to basically populate our live view of the camera, what we see through the camera. And you can see that we are getting that information from the target material, and then the render texture is the one that is going to have that value. Now the capture frame, I'm not going to go through that, but all it does is going to set the capture image, that texture, to the capture frame. That means that if I hit the capture button, it's going to have basically a still image of what was captured at that point. And then I'm also, once that happens, I'm going to be basically sending a request to the LLM that I have designated automatically, and it's going to be passing the keyboard text and also the capture frame. And then on destroy, it's just going to keep things clean, make sure that if this is not null, destroy the capture frame so that we don't end up with memory leaks. So now if we go back into Unity, you're going to see that we're going to need to populate a lot of information in here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the LLM agent. That's going to be this guy. You can also select it by doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. The live image, it's going to be, basically I name them in a way that it was going to be really easy to know what they are. Capture button is going to be this capture button right here, and that's going to be under buttons. So you can see that it's going to be that toggle. So let's go back into this guy and then scroll down, actually pass through camera access, and then just make sure that you populate that as well. Then the prompt keyboard text is going to be on this component here. And then the LLM response scroll view, it's going to be this component in here so that we can toggle it, right? Depending if we get data back, then show it. If not, don't show it. And then this is going to be basically our custom Quest TMP keyboard, which handles how to communicate with the actual keyboard. And if you scroll down in here, you're going to see that that component it's added in here. And it looks like this is not basically populated correctly. We can just go ahead and drag it and drop it, and now it should be good to go. I'm also going to go ahead and override this so that everything is clean. Just make sure that we put this, let's go ahead and set it to be right about, I think I did basically 1 meter away from the floor. And then also going to put it right in front of the player. We can do something like 0.5. That way it's going to be right in front of us. And then I think that should be good. And then the scale, just depending on how you want this to basically be positioned and scale. And then I also move this component, basically remove the Quest TMP keyboard and re-added it. And that caused that there was a missing reference in here. Just make sure that you check these references and that nothing is going to be missing. I took a look at the code here, and if you look at this component here, we're trying to get the LLM response text, and it's trying to get it from itself, which basically is not correct. If you go in here and basically expand the dialog container canvas, and we look at the components inside of the dialog 2 button, you're gonna see that I have a scroll view. So what I was trying to get is the children inside of this component that has basically a UI component, a text UI component, which is the LLM response, which is going to be this component. So what I need to do though instead is I need to get it from the scroll view. So I'm going to say LLM response scroll view. All right, so it looks like the window, it's working correctly. You can see here that we should be able to move it around. So I'm going to start with something very simple, and we don't need to provide a prompt because by default, it's going to grab the prompt from one of the pre-built options. So I'm just going to go ahead and say capture. And as soon as I say capture, if we bring this closer, you're going to see the image depicts a person hand holding a remote control with their thumb on top of it. And you can see here that it found a laptop, a microphone, a book titled Essential Mathematics for Game Dev, which is really impressive. You guys can see it right over there. Who is the book author? And then we can go ahead and, okay, so I'm gonna bring it closer to me. It doesn't need to be too close, but I just wanna make sure that we get, and you can see that the author was written by Fabrizio Espindola, and you can see that it actually captured that information. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do a capture. Maybe I'll just bring this guy closer to me so that we can see right over there. I took a capture, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and rotate this so that we can see what he's doing. Okay, so we can see the code snippet provider. Let me make sure that it's aligned. The snippet provider appears to be written in C#, and it seems to be a part of a Unity project. Okay, that's correct. It seems to be responsible for capturing frames from a camera and processing them. Here's a breakdown: frame capture processing, get camera texture. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video and you can see the power of using large language models with your XR experiences. In my opinion, it's going to take experiences that are okay or good. By using LLMs, you can actually take it to a completely different level. If you guys have any questions about anything that I show you today, let me know in the comments below. Hit the notification bell when you subscribe. And as always, happy XR coding, everyone. Thank you. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video and you see the power. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoy. Large language models combined with XR can be honestly